Welcome to this presentation on documentation and ethical note-taking. The faintest ink is more powerful than the strongest memory. This quote is so relevant to the work we do with clients every day and to the importance of documentation and keeping clear and concise records. If you have worked in a capacity where you are developing action plans, facilitating intake assessments, communicating with stakeholders, referral sources, and the list goes on, you will recognize that very quickly your capacity to keep all of these conversations stored in your memory will become impossible. Furthermore, you will know that clients and others involved in those conversations may have a very different understanding or recollection of the same events and conversations. Here is an overview of what we will discuss today. We will start with the question 1. Why keep records, or what is the importance of good record keeping? 2. Not only do we want to keep good records, but we need to understand what should be included in notes, and 3. As important, what should not be included in our notes. 4. We want to consider the importance of understanding confidentiality and privacy. 5. SOAP. This is a good way to remember what to include in notes. 6. Often we are a part of a team that provides services. There are certain principles that are important to remember. Why keep records? If you've been in the field of rehab or employment services for any length of time, you will have been the recipient of a transferred file or full caseload. In the process of becoming oriented to your new job or client, you receive a phone call from a rather loud and angry individual who claims to be one of your clients. The client reports that he has been with the program for the past 6 months and is tired of the runaround. Once you've established that he is in fact on your caseload, you recognize the client as one who you would believe has received a great deal of support. The conversation continues with allegations of non-support, no return calls, and lack of competency in providing assistance. As you listen, you calmly pull up the client file and notes, expecting of course to find a full set of the necessary intake and assessment documents, as well as clear and concise progress notes that include meetings, contacts, and next steps. The file comes up and you quickly scroll through the documents folder and program notes. It is a quick scroll because in fact the file is very sparse in its contents. You have no idea of client participation or progress. You sit in silence as the client continues to rage. At this point, there is no recourse or evidence to the client's allegations. It becomes quickly evident for why we should keep records. Let's discuss some of these reasons. Number 1, refresh your memory. Especially with a large caseload, it's great to be able to quickly review a file prior to a meeting or phone call. It will provide perspective and direction for your next interaction. 2, they facilitate day-to-day work. Allow us to keep track of progress and create summary discharge reports. When it comes to writing reports or providing rationale, a good set of records make it much easier to provide rationale, comment on participation levels, etc. 3. Ministry audits. They provide a way to demonstrate the great work that we do and fulfill contract obligations. Each of our contracts holds eligibility criteria, as well as certain contractual obligations. Recording contacts and storing required documents in an accessible way make audits run smoothly. 4. Your caseload may be transferred to someone else. Inform other providers, future or concurrent. We all want the best for our clients, and keeping good records makes for a smooth and seamless transition between clinicians. Many of our clients have been receiving services of one kind or another for a period of time. They are tired of providing the same information over and over. This can be prevented with all records that are kept up to date and organized in an easy-to-follow format. 5. Justify service provided or not provided. It may not be apparent why a service was provided or not. Making program notes, including a reason or rationale, will limit any questioning. 6. Justify payment if relevant. Many services require verification of attendance or client signatures prior to payment or during an audit. 7. Meet program requirements. 8. In the event that the file ends up in court, it is important to know the sequence of events, specific dates, who was involved, etc. It is important to remember that records will be scrutinized. Good notes will protect you from allegations of misconduct. If you are called into question, you can easily refer to notes. 9. Communicate with team members, depending on the service. Many of our services have several staff who work with the same client in different capacities. Notes allow sharing of information and ensures that everyone is on the same page in terms of goals, next steps, etc. What should be included in a note or record? There will be different requirements for what is needed as identifying information. However, within a note, it is best to format it in a consistent way so that each documentation is easily followed. We have suggested the following areas be included: the name of the client and other identifying information, the date, the purpose of the consultation, the substance of each service offered, what service was offered, the outcomes or progress, the plan, and problems and troubleshooting. Other things that should be included in a note or record include any test results or other evaluative reports obtained, tests or reports prepared as part of the service, notations and results from any formal consults with other service providers, any releases or consents executed by the client, a copy of all documents relied upon in the course of providing service, fee arrangement, if applicable. For important decisions, document the options considered, the risks or benefits, the pros or cons, decision-making procedure, including consults with other professionals and with the client, as well as outcome and follow-up. If it might make a mess, make a note. The riskier or more sticky the situation, the more important it becomes to make notes. Notes will demonstrate your thoughtfulness and standard of practice. If called into question, you can easily refer to your notes. All of us are very busy. Often the last thing we want to do is document. However, when you get into this habit and determine what works best for you, you will recognize how important it is and that it will save time for you in the long run. Always have in mind that notes may be read by others, and for this reason, the following areas are important. Records and notes must be complete. It's okay to bullet and provide brief and concise notes. However, ensure that others will also be clear when they review. Accessible. In most cases, systems are set up so that documents are kept in an accessible location. Accessibility is also important for assessments and documents within a file. Ensure that the identifying information is consistent and easy to find. Each entry dated and signed. The best notes and documents may be irrelevant or dismissed if they are not clearly dated and signed where required. The writer needs to be identified for future reference. Any amendments or alterations need to be dated and signed or initialed. This may include client signatures. You don't want surprises for clients. If there are amendments or changes to services or supports, it's important that the client is aware of these. Clients may be resistant to signing or may not want to come back to the office. Organize your documents and meetings to minimize clients having to return for the sole purpose of signing a document. Create a glossary for idiosyncratic or non-standard abbreviations. Our ministry contracts have many abbreviations and acronyms. Ensure that these are clear for those who may not have this familiarity. If you are providing the documents to another person, remember to paginate. Here's a quick overview of what should be documented. All one-to-one interactions with a client, all telephone contact with a client, all telephone and in-person contact with other parties done on behalf of the client for example, parents, physicians, employers, or counselor. All unsuccessful attempts to contact the client or other relevant parties. Emails to and from the client become part of the client file. In all of our documentation and work with clients, self-awareness is important. Our own personal experiences, attitudes, and values can influence how we view and interpret a situation. It's important to always keep in mind and to be as objective as possible. Differentiate between facts, opinions, theories, hypotheses, and ideas in all communication. Some things to keep in mind and to help keep us objective are found in this table below. Do remember to use neutral language, describe observable behavior, be specific, and state the source of information. Do not make comments about personality, use vague, general terms, report others' opinions or statements as fact, or use value-laden terms. What should not be in your notes? Notes should always be respectful and accurate. They should always respect the dignity of the client and should convey actual progress observed. Avoid words such as difficult, resistant, unmotivated, uncooperative. An example would be derogatory comments. Client X is lazy and unmotivated. You should also avoid including assumptions or inferences unless you indicate clearly that you are making an inference or assumption. An example would be Client X is reluctant to commit to training program due to fear of failure. Remember to document the source of the information. For example, Client X reported, or it is my opinion that I am concerned that. What should not be in your notes? Be clear on what information is objective based on clear observations and results versus what is subjective, the client's report or your opinion. Example, client does not show up for workshop versus the reason the client did not show up for the workshop. Names of third parties should not be in your notes, nor should information that is not relevant to the service being provided. It is very important to protect the client's privacy. A good rule of thumb: always write your notes assuming your client will read them. Ask yourself these questions. What is the goal of the interaction? What is the expected outcome of the interaction? What are the next steps following the interaction? Confidentiality and privacy. We often use the terms confidentiality and privacy interchangeably. However, they mean distinctly different things from a legal standpoint. To begin with, confidentiality refers to personal information shared with an attorney, physician, therapist, or other individual that generally cannot be divulged to third parties without the express consent of the client. It pertains to treatment of information that an individual has disclosed in a relationship of trust. Privacy refers to the freedom from intrusion into one's personal matters and personal information. It is about an individual's right to control access to personal information. While confidentiality is an ethical duty, privacy is a right rooted in common law. Confidentiality. Establishing trust with clients is very important. Clients and stakeholders need to have a good understanding of what it means to keep information confidential. This is where obtaining clear consent from clients is so important. Clients need to be informed where we feel it is necessary to share information in the best interests of the client. Records and notes may be requested for legal reasons or by other stakeholders. There must be careful consideration and a clear understanding that authorization is given prior to sharing information. Privacy. Privacy has to do with information that is shared between the client and worker. You need to use discretion in discerning what information is pertinent to the services being delivered. It's important to respect personal information, and in particular sensitive information about the client, to only record or report information that is germane to the service being provided, and to avoid asking about issues that are not relevant to the service being provided. Here's an easy way to remember what's important in writing notes. This is an example of SOAP notes, where S stands for subjective, and this is where you would record the client's report. O stands for objective, where you would record the facts, clear observations, results, what has actually happened. A for assessment or action, where you would record your opinion, identify the issues, the problems, barriers, obstacles, and what action you took during the meeting. And P for the plan, where you would record a plan for the client, either short or long term. Here's an example of a SOAP note. This example gives a very clear overview of the situation. It provides the client's perspective, the facts objectively, the worker's assessment and opinion, and the plan moving forward. S. The client reported he has been feeling discouraged about his financial situation and his perception that his job prospects are poor. Client reported that he has submitted 15 resumes this week with no response. O. Client missed resume building workshop this week, has not reviewed his resume with me. A. I am concerned that his resume needs some work. Discuss this with client. Also discuss reality of job market and what he can reasonably expect regarding response to his job applications. Provided reassurance that it is not unusual to not hear back from potential employers within a few days. P. Client to bring in resume to work on with me in meeting next week. Over our next few meetings, we will focus on discussion of other job search and networking strategies. What if you work in a multidisciplinary team? Most of us work in a team setting. If not, there may be times when our documents or notes need to be shared. For the most part, the previously discussed guidelines apply. There are a few additional areas to consider. Records in a team setting. In a multidisciplinary team, clear and relevant notes are so critical. Although team meetings and daily interactions are part of the team environment, there are many times when team members independently follow up with clients in providing their part of the service. For example, in employment services, the case manager works with the client to develop the action plan and guides the client throughout the time they are receiving services. However, the client may also have interactions with the resource room coordinator, the facilitator, administrative assistant, and the job developer. Each of these staff members would have access to the client's documents and rely on an existing and ongoing set of documentation. Notes and records can be an effective and efficient way of communicating between team members if they include useful and relevant information, if they are brief, and if they are used as intended. Records in a team setting. Confidentiality. Is the client aware that others will have access to information? For example, information sharing among team members. Is there a way to ensure that certain information is kept confidential? Some records not accessible to the entire team. Generally, the best time to discuss confidentiality is as part of the orientation or intake. Clients should be aware of who has access to information and that information is kept confidential. Privacy. What information is recorded? Is the information included germane to the service? Does the rest of the team need to know this? When more than one person will be accessing client information, it is that much more important to consider the privacy of client information. Again, the question must be asked, is the information being documented relevant to the services we are providing? Is it important for the rest of the team to know this information? What if there's a request for release of my records? Occasionally, a client may request records or there may be a legal request for records. Each contract will have information and policy around release of information. It's best to review this for your particular program. Clients can have access to their records, including your notes. Clients should be informed of limits to confidentiality at the outset within the process of informed consent. No disclosure without written consent, except in exceptional circumstances, such as imminent threat to self or others. In our Work BC employment services, files are considered property of the ministry, and the request for release of records needs to go through the ministry. For requests in rehab services, every request is reviewed by each clinic's information officer. Records and notes must be legible, kept confidential, accessible, retrievable, and safeguarded against foreseeable threats. It's important that all documents are placed in a locked, secure location when you are away from your desk. Documenting consent in a record. Consent must be informed. The client must understand what they are consenting to, as well as issues related to confidentiality and privacy, the risks and benefits of the service, and their right to refuse service. Voluntary. The client can discontinue or refuse at any time. Competent. The client must be able to understand what they are consenting to, understand their options, and be able to anticipate consequences. To conclude, here are a few helpful hints. 1. Set aside a period of time each day for program notes. 2. Keep a pen and paper handy at all times to make notes during interactions. 3. Date and initial all entries. 4. Consider using the GON format. G stands for what is the goal or purpose of the interaction. O stands for what is the expected outcome of the interaction. N stands for what are the next steps following the interaction. You may also consider using abbreviations that are acceptable in your department and also by your profession. There are examples listed here, TT for talk to and VM for voicemail, but there are many others that you could consider using. If you are having difficulty in keeping up with your documentation, it's important for you to come up with what works best for you. Thank you for listening to this presentation. We hope that you enjoyed it.